This paper is actually comes out of a bigger project I've been involved in online game industry in China since 2009. And the title is Working as Playing, Consumer Labor, Guilds, and the Secondary Industry of Online Gaming in China. As we all know that China is now one of the sort of biggest producers and consumers of online games in the world. But when we talk about gamers, we think about the otaku youth, the 宅男宅女, the unproductive consumers who actually prefers the virtual thrills of an imaginary world than the quotidian real life, and who don't really actually contribute much to society. I think this sort of stereotypical image of online gamers actually has prevented us from seeing the productive and entrepreneurial side of online gamers. What I have discovered since I embarked on this project is a booming secondary industry emerged in the past few years out of the spontaneous and bottom-up energy of gamers. And in my article, I sort of have debunked the image of online gamer as unproductive and passive, and instead opted for the metaphor of a productive consumer labor who work and toil for the industry as an indispensable component. I also contend that gamers are not passive addicts, but neither are they the prosumer or active audience depicted in academic literature of participatory culture and digital empowerment. Instead, I look at the sort of secondary industry in China of online gaming as a result of the local embedding of global information capitalism, which reflects China's awkward position in the global division of labor, and the tensions inherent in China's creative and information economy after 3 decades of experiment with neoliberal globalization. So, if capitalist society is always able to re-energize and reinvent itself by incorporating the use value of labor power that resides outside of capital into its command, how is the value of consumer labor actually being reimagined and monetized, and its excess regulated and managed? And my second question is, how does the changing relationship between consumer labor and capital intersect with the dominant ideology of neoliberalism in shaping emerging collective and individual subjectivities? And also, I have a third question, but I have time to go into that. So basically, the focus of my article is on online gaming guilds in China, and they actually originated as organizations for gamers in online games to facilitate progression and encourage socialization. But paralleling the rise of secondary industry, they have undergone a rapid commodification process in the past few years, which also sort of coincide with intensification of competition in online gaming industry in China since 2005 and 2006. And what I've observed is that the driving force behind the commodification is actually the thorny dilemma faced by the online gaming industry in China. Although by 2002, domestically developed online game titles have sort of dominated the market, the industry is actually bottlenecked by two disadvantages. First is a lack of innovation mechanism and creative and dedicated talents, though we have a great talented innovator at Mr. Chen, but in general the situation is sort of not very optimistic. And then as well as a sort of unhealthy eagerness for quick success and quick profits and instant success at the expense of product quality. So unlike in the mature market where innovation and quality drive growth, the Chinese online game industry relies heavily on cheap labor, vast consumer market, and large but capricious domestic and international investment demanding huge and quick returns. So I don't have time to really go to this point, but basically what I've observed is that the disproportionately large amount of labor has been offloaded to gamers to reduce costs and to stay competitive in the tough market. And this need for a sort of a meeting site between gamers and industry actually led to the commodification of guilds. And I learned from my interviews with my gamers that some of the popular ways for guild masters or the core leadership of the guild to make money include the rewards points system, the selling of game testing counts and game gift packages, and generating soft advertising for news release. And as one of my interviewees recalled that the year 2006 saw a dramatic increase in the number of new guilds because people actually saw profits in guilds. And some members were not content by being sold out by their GMs to game companies, so they started their own business. Many of them are actually profit-oriented. So as Chinese online gaming guilds have transformed from a sort of virtual support group in the early years to a hybrid institution of online communities and brokerage units between consumer laborers and game companies, they take on a sort of curious function of channeling and managing the consumer labor's effective productivity so that the values generated are easily measured and utilized for industrial expansion and profit maximization. So regarding my first research question, I argue that the value in this new economy is sort of reimagined in terms of affect and social relations, as guild-based collective and competitive play become one of the most important sources of labor and profit. As communities of gamers by gamers, guilds have the innate capacity to attract, organize, and keep players in the game. For instance, leaders of guilds usually handpick like 3 or more games to join each year, which is known as to station or to 进驻 a game. It used to be that the selection of a game was totally based on its merits. Now, commercial incentive come to dominate. Guilds are also the sort of most important and effective mechanism for retaining gamers in online games, which has to do with the gamers' effective labor that make the environment, more than just power leveling and looting, but a virtual world of community and competition that both reflects and transcends the real world. And apart from the community factor, inter-guild competition bolsters player commitment and boosts in-game trade. It is very common for 2 or more guilds that start feuds in one game to subsequently seek revenge and engage in a serious wars in other games. And this is actually a screenshot of the guild, typical guild wars. You can see the sheer number of people involved and labor involved in this kind of event. And to capitalize on guild wars, companies often invite rivalry guilds to compete in sponsored guild tournaments while generating buzzes by frequently publishing inside stories or battle reports on game forums or major game portals to catch eyeballs. And we just skip this and move on to the second question. So how does this changing relationship actually shape the subjectivities? To answer this question, I interviewed what I call consumer labor entrepreneurs and found that what has accompanied the new professions, opportunities, and flexibilities created by the secondary industry is actually a rise of individuality, self-engineering, self-reliant mentalities, and a growing sense of competition, insecurities, and precariousness. And the commodification of guild and consumer labor is simultaneously frowned upon and avidly pursued by guilders. In my interview, I actually sort of discovered 3 basic types of consumer labor entrepreneurs. The first is freelancers. Freelancers are usually not officially employed by game companies on full-time basis and are often actively involved in guild community either as game masters or experienced members. Those part-time jobs are sort of sporadic and poorly paid, and a major theme that ran through almost all my interviews with the gamers is they have to be their own boss and then to improvise and to be flexible. And most of the jobs are actually short-term and contract-based, and they can be fired or discarded at any time. And their relationship with the industry, they have to sort of prove to the companies that of their value. And the gamer turned employees are those former guild members who found a way to turn their hobby into a full-time formal employment. They usually serve as guild relation managers or working marketing team because the people network established when they were guild gamers can be fully utilized. And many of my interviewees discussed how they had to constantly deal with and adapt to industry expectations of gamers. And as they began to take up the insiders' viewpoints, new subjectivities are being cultivated in them that often kind of stand in conflict with values treasured by game communities. And usually they have to prioritize the industry's perspective. And lastly is guild turned industrialist, and they're like they start up guild farming factories, guild media, and some of them even have their own developing firms. But they are faced with a even more daunting task of convincing the whole industry of their unique value. So to wrap up, the blurring of the boundary between work and play, virtuality and reality, has brought real consequences to both the guild community and the gaming industry. But what I contend is that the process is definitely not neutral and unproblematic. Concepts like moral economy, social network market, and co-evolution of the two seem to suggest that capitalism is moral and even philanthropic, and the commercialization of guild, of community, human relations, and human bodies is an irreversible trend to be embraced and celebrated. However, they also ran the risk of siding with the commercial discourses advocated by the industry and to sort of normalize the neoliberal enterprising subjectivities and the branding of the self as desirable communities. So what I have depicted is what I believe is a kind of more sort of balanced or realistic story behind the success of a few individuals. So the self-amelioration is often achieved sort of at the expense of the community by capitalizing on other gamers' free labor, which only render the community sort of more unequal.